Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Monique. It's been a while. I hope everyone is doing well. If you are new here, please kindly click on the red button below to subscribe. In these tutorials, we'll be learning how to make this easy pencil dress with side drape and asymmetric neckline. So let's get into it. I'll be using 2.5 yards of stretchy fabric for this tutorial. So this is the pattern paper I'll be using. I'm going to fold it into two. I'll be using the biggest part of the body, which is the hip. I'll divide it by 4 and I'm going to add 2 inches for seam allowance. So this is the shoulder line where all my measurements will start from. So the first measurement I'll take is the shoulder width. Half of the shoulder is 7.5. I added half an inch, that's 8 inches. So I'm coming down by 1 inch for the shoulder slope. Then I'm going to take the neck width. I'm using 4 inches for the neck width. Then I'll come down for the neck depth. I'll be using 4.5 inches. So I'll be making a square neckline. I'll be altering the neckline later on. So this is the neckline. So the next thing I'll do is remember we came down by 1 inch for the shoulder slope. I'll just connect it to the neck width. After doing that, from this shoulder slope, I'll take the chest line. The chest line for this measurement is 8 inches. I'll go ahead and mark it out. Then I'll connect it this way. Then I'll take the shoulder to bust point. So the shoulder to bust point is 11 inches. Then I'll take the shoulder to waist. The shoulder to waist is 17 inches. So after doing that, I'll take the shoulder to hip. The shoulder to hip is 26 inches. Then I'll take the shoulder to full length. The shoulder to full length is 40 inches. I'll be adding 2 inches for seam allowance. That's 42 inches. So I'll go ahead and connect the lines. So this is the bust line. This is the waistline, the hip line, and the full length. So the next thing I'll do is to take the shoulder width and place it on the chest line. So remember our shoulder width, the shoulder width I use is 8 inches. So I'll just take a straight line. Then I'll get the midpoint of this line. So the midpoint of this line is 4 inches. So from the midpoint, I'll come in by 0.75 like this. Then I'm going to make a slant line to meet the 0.75. Then I'll take the bust circumference. Quarter of the bust is 9.5. The bust is 38 inches. Then I'm going to add 1.5 inches for seam allowance. And for the waist is 31. Quarter of 31 will give me 7.75. So I'm going to add 1.5 inches for seam allowance. I'm not adding that to this measurement because it's a stretchy fabric. But if you're using a normal fabric, I'll advise you add that to it. So on the hip line, the hip is 41. Quarter of 41 will give me 10.25. So I'm going to add 1.5 inches for seam allowance. So what I have on the hip, I'll be using the exact hip measurement on the full length without seam allowance. So I'll be placing 10.25 here without adding seam allowance. So the reason why I did that is because we are making a pencil dress. So now I'm going to connect the armhole. So the next thing I'll do is to connect these points. So this is our front pattern. So I'll go ahead and cut it out. So I'll place another pattern paper for the back. So to cut the back, I've gone ahead to mark 1 inch for the zipper allowance for the back. So I'll be placing the front pattern on the zipper allowance, that is the center front. So I'll just mark the waistline and the hip line. Then I'll fold this part so that I'll tighten the zipper allowance to avoid zip bulge. So I'm taking the shoulder to back half length and I'm using 16 inches. So on this 16 inches mark, I'm going to come in by 0.75. You can also use half an inch, it's okay. But for this measurement, I'm using 0.75. We are doing this to avoid zip bulge. So I'll connect it to the neckline like this. Then I'll connect this other part to the hip line here outside of the 1 inch zipper allowance like this. So after doing this, from this hip line here, I'm going to connect it straight inside like this. Inside, we are making a pencil dress, so it's supposed to have fitting at the back part. So on this dress we are making, the back is going to be closed. It's not going to have any slits. So I'll just go ahead and and cut this out, and I'm following the front panel. So on the armhole, I'll add extra 1/2 inch on the armhole for the back. Remember, the front is 1/2 inch deeper than the back. So I'll keep the front aside and I'll cut out the excess for on the zipper allowance to avoid zip bulge. So before then, for the back neck, remember we use 4 inches for the back width. I'll come down by 2 inches for the back depth. That's the neck depth. So I'll connect it this way and cut it out. After doing this, I'll just trim out this excess. So our back panel is ready. So I'll go back to the front panel. Remember, I told you we are going to alter the neckline. So I've traced out I used my tracing wheel to trace out the neck. So this is the square shape I did earlier. So from the neck width, I'll come in by 1 inch. Then I'll just from this neck width and connect it to this 1 inch with a slant line. Then I'll take my armhole curve and make a little curve to meet this 1 inch I came in. So this is our neck style line. So from this point, from this 1 inch, I'll take a straight line all the way to the full length. So I'll just make a straight line like this. So in order to get an accurate line, I'll just fold it this way. So this is the crease line. So as you can see, it's straight. So I'm going to follow this line and cut it out. So we'll be cutting it out because it's going to have a drape. So I'm going to cut out the neckline. Then I'll follow this line all the way down. So I'm going to keep this aside. Then on this side, from the hip line, I'll come down by 4 inches. Then from the bust line here, I'm going to come down by 2 inches. Then I'll continue taking another 2 inches like this. So I'm marking 2 inches. So from this hip line, I'll connect it to this point here, to this first mark. Then after doing this, I'm going to draw another line. Then I'll measure what I have here. I have about 3.5. So I'm going to mark another 3.5 from this point. Then I'm going to connect it to the next 2 inches mark. So I'll continue doing the same thing for the other side. I'll mark 3.5 inches. Then I'll connect it to this other point. I'll do the same thing for the last part. I'll mark the 3.5 inches, then I'll connect it to this point. So I'm just going to mark it. This is the first line, the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth line. So I'll cut through these lines. So before doing that, I'm going to place it on a fabric. So this is the stretchy. As you can see, the fabric is stretchy. So I'll be placing the pattern paper on the stretchy part like this. So I'll start cutting through the lines. So I'll start cutting it like so. As you can see, I'm not cutting it completely. I'm leaving like 1/2 inch before the end of the pattern. So I'm going to open it up like this. So I gave a space of 2.5 inches on each line. I gave space of 2.5 inches. So I also marked this part out so that I don't get confused when pleating it. So I made like an angle line, an angle shape. So I know that each pleat is going to be on this angle point. So I'll just cut it out. So I'll be tracing this mark I made. It's just a guide to help me pleat it properly. And make sure you secure it with a pin when you are cutting it. So now I'm going to pleat it. I'll follow this angle shape I made like this. So this is the first pleat. So I'm going to pin it up. Then I'll do the second one. As you can see, I'm following it. So I know that it's going to be on the other side. So I'll continue doing it for all the pleats. So I'm securing it with a pin. So I'm going to measure it to make sure I have the exact measurement for the dress. So I'll correct it. I notice it's a little bit long. So I think I have the exact measurements now. I have about 42 inches. So I'll be cutting out this excess later on. So this is the other side of the front panel. I've gone ahead to cut it on the fabric. Then I've also cut out the back panel. So I cut out 2. This is the back panel. So I'll be joining the smaller side of the front panel to this part that I pleated. That's to the bigger side. But before I do that, I'll be attaching a band like a placket on this part. That is, it's going to be in between the 2 panels. So I've cut out another strip of fabric for the placket. It's on a fold and I have 1.5 inches on a fold. So I'll be placing it here like this. I'll place it on the smaller panel. So I'll start placing it from the shoulder here. So I'll place it from the shoulder. So I'll pin it up. So I'll be top stitching this part to secure the pleats. Then I'll cut out the excess. I'll be trimming out the excess. So after I do that, then I'm going to sew this part. I'll be sewing it by 1/4 inch. I'll show you. So I've done that. I stitched it by 1/4 inch. So this is what we have. I've also ironed it. Then on this other part, I've also done the same thing. I've top stitched it. Then I also ironed it. Then I cut out the excess. Then what I'm going to do to join it to the other side, I'll make sure I have the accurate neckline. So the neckline we used, that's the neck depth, we used 4.5 inches. So I'm marking it so that I'll place this other part on this 4.5 inches mark so that we'll have an accurate neckline. So I'll place it together like this. So as you can see, the band is in between the 2 panels. So I'm going to pin it up. So I'll be sewing it by 1/2 inch. So we'll have something like this when we sew it. So I'll go ahead and sew it and show you. I've attached the band to the dress that is in between the 2 panels. As you can see, this is our neckline. So I started sewing it from the shoulder all the way to the full length. So the next thing we are doing is to place facing on the neckline. So I've gone ahead to cut it out. So this is the front facing and this is also the back facing. So I'll be adding interfacing to it, a hairstay to make it firm. So I'll do that. Then I'm going to place it on the dress. That is the good side to good side. I'll be sewing it by 1/4 inch all the way to this point. So I'll do that and show you. So guys, I've done that. I've attached interfacing to the facing and I've stitched it all the way. I used 1/4 inch to sew the neckline. So this is the outcome. I repeated the same thing for the back, but I also joined the center back by 1 inch. So I joined it by 1 inch and I stopped where I want the zipper to start. So I'll be attaching zipper on this point. Then I left this part open. I left about 1 inch open because the zip is going to pass through this part. So I'll be explaining this later. Then the next thing I'm going to do is to fix the zip. So this is the zip. So I'll just place the good side of the zip on one side of the back panel. I'll come down by 1/2 inch before fixing the zip. So I'll be sewing it by 1 inch all the way to the end. So after I sew the first part, I'll turn the other panel over. This other part, I'll turn it over and I'll stitch on the other side. I'll also come down by 1/2 inch from the top part. Then I'll sew it all the way to the end. Then I'll show you. So guys, we've fixed our zipper. So this is the zip. This is the outcome. So what I did was, so after fixing the zip, I placed the facing on the top part and I stitched it by 1/4 inch. Then on this side, I stitched it also very close to the zip. So then I pulled it out and we have this. So I repeated the same thing on the other side of the back panel. Then on the front panel, I left this side open. I think I left about 6 inches here. So the slit is going to be on the front panel. So now I'll be joining the front and back together. I'll be joining it on the shoulder. So I'll open it up. That is the facing. I'll open it up. So I'll be sewing on the shoulder seam. That is the front and the back. I'll sew it on the shoulder seam. I'll make sure the two seams are aligning like so. So I'll pin it up. So I'll be sewing it by 1/2 inch. I'll repeat the same thing on the other shoulder. I'll open it up like this. This is the front and this is the back. So I'll make sure I place it on the seam of the shoulder. Then I'm going to sew it by 1/2 inch. So after I sew it, then I'll sew the two sides together. I left 1.5 inches for seam allowance. So I'll be sewing it by 1.5 inch all the way to the full length. I'll do the same thing on this other side. I'll sew it by 1.5 inches, then I'll show you. So I've fixed the side seam and I've also fixed the shoulder. So this is the dress. We are almost done. So I also went ahead to weave it inside to have a clean finishing. So now we'll be fixing the sleeve. So this is our pattern, our sleeve pattern. I'm sure you know how to draft the basic sleeve. I already have a video on how to draft the basic sleeve. I'll be dropping it on the description box. I'll be sewing this here by 1 inch. After I sew it, then I'll place it on the armhole, and I'll sew it round and show you. So guys, this is our dress. I've fixed the sleeve. This is the other sleeve. So we're almost done with the dress. So I decided to attach buttons to the dress. So I'll be placing 2 here. Then on the lower side, I'll place 3. So I'll sew it with my hand needle and I'll show you. So guys, we are done with the dress. We fixed the buttons. So the buttons are just for fancy. It's not compulsory. If you don't want it, you can leave it. On the slit here, I used 5 inches for the length of the slit. Then on the side of the slit here, I hemmed it by 1/2 inch. I repeated the same thing on this other side. I hemmed it by 1/2 inch. So this is our dress. We've come to the end of these tutorials. I hope it was helpful. Please don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and share. Thanks for watching and see you in my next video.